Coming up on UGTV. A special session of the Unified Government of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas.
Meeting to order. Thank everyone for being here. I'd ask the clerk to announce the meeting and call the roll, please.
A special session is being held on Thursday, May 23rd, 2019, at 5 o'clock p.m. in the fifth floor conference room regarding capital maintenance improvement projects. Immediately following, the commission will reconvene to the ninth floor conference room for an executive session regarding litigation. Roll call. Kane. Here. Markley. Here. Walters. Here. Philbrook.
Here.
Bynum.
Here.
Burrows.
Here.
Townsend.
Here.
McKiernan.
Here.
Mugia.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Alvey.
Here. Tonight we have a presentation on the capital maintenance improvement projects. I'll turn it over to Administrator Bach to introduce staff.
Thank you, Mayor, Commission. So 2 weeks ago, we really went through the highlights of what's in the 2020 budget coming on. Tonight, our presentation is fairly limited. We wanted to show you our new project tracking software, and then we're going to do a presentation as well on where we're at with the 47th Avenue corridor. And then from then, we'll really just be looking at what we have proposed in the debt and cash projects if you have any questions on what we submitted out a couple of weeks ago. But with that, I'm going to turn this over to our Deputy Public Works Director, David Young, and he's going to talk about our new software, our system.
Thank you, Administrator Bach, Commissioners. Good evening. I appreciate the opportunity to come and speak for a few minutes. Briefly, we are going to be talking about a new application that's available publicly tonight. You'll be able to share this with any of your constituent groups and submit questions to us and input. We really appreciate that. So with that, Rob Anderson, our asset manager, is going to talk about the application. But what I'd like to say before we start, this application is being circulated with all of our private utilities as well. We hope to, in the next few months, include all of those projects in this map and use this as part of our annual project planning proposal. Thank you.
I'm just going to give a brief demo here on how you can get to this and kind of how to use it and what information is available to you. If you were at the Public Works landing page, you scroll to the bottom, very bottom, there's an accordion. You can expand this, and there's a hyperlink here. This will bring you to this map that I will show you in a second. A secondary way that you or the public could get to this map would be to type in projects into the search bar, if my keyboard worked. Apologies. Projects. And that will bring up a link to the engineering page, which also hosts this. And you can see here that it clearly identifies itself as the capital maintenance and improvement. So we're going to click on that. Fingers crossed it works. So when this loads, we will be landing on the projects that are happening this year. Inside this map, you can zoom in and interact with the layers. Just to briefly go through the legend here, the thicker blue lines are the capital improvement projects. The dots are also capital improvement projects of a different sort that are not linear. And the road preservation program is highlighted with a skinnier blue line. And the ADA ramp program is outlined by polygons. So now to interact with this map, you can click on a feature. So say this is a project of interest to all of us. And we will click on it and the title comes up, I-70 and Turner Diagonal Reconstruction. Project manager is KDOT, has a really brief description of the project, a phone number where you can reach that contact, the construction year, and then either a picture of the actual area or a diagram of the project. When you click on that, it'll take you out to a larger format photo so you can view that. In addition to that, other assets have been identified for projects. For example, here you have a 34th Street box culvert improvement, replacing existing box. There's the construction year, the project manager, brief description, contact phone number, and Dave Reno was nice enough to go out and collect some photos of some of these assets so that kind of helps inform the public of what activities are actually happening. Again, this photo is something you can click on and link out to. The ADA ramp project consists of a lot of little dots, and that would have been busy to display here. So instead, created a polygon layer, and in this you can click out to a PDF of the plans and scroll through this and examine the plans as you wish. So if there's a project in your district that's of interest to you, you can navigate using this map to get to more added information, and it'll also give you the information of which project manager to communicate with to find out more details. At the top, there's additional tabs. You can click on the next tab, you'll see future projects. So in this case, it's 20 to 24. This is a living document. So as the calendar years change and you approve different budgets, information that we map here will change too. Additionally, I know it's tiny on this map. At the top of each map is my contact information if you need help understanding the map or navigating it. And I'll zoom out to show a little bit more of the projects coming up. For example, down here we have Metropolitan Avenue Bikeways project listed out for 2020, contact for the project manager, and a photo of the project area. The reason we're taking photos before is because we also want to take photos after, so that we can communicate with the public what type of activities we're doing. And to show a little bit more of the breadth of the work we do, we have also included a historic tab showing a lot of the projects that have been done over the last 5 years. Again, this information calls out project managers, their phone numbers, contact details, and more information about the project. In the future, I intend to connect these out to plans related to these projects.
I think there's a couple of points here. In the existing year, in the 2019 CMIP map, developers around the community will be able to access the plans currently, so they can see without calling anything that's going on in their neighborhood. So tying in road segments is very important. Looking out at the 2020 to 2024 map, businesses and developers in our community will look and see in one pane of glass where we're planning to do construction in the future. Also, when you're meeting with constituents on your cell phone, you'll notice some of you have pulled this up. If you zoom in on your particular commission district and you change tabs, it keeps the same view. So you can see everything that's happened in your commission district, what's happening in the next few years, and what's happening this year. Long-term, with the Acela upgrade, we will also include construction permits in this map.
Yeah. So a real quick question, if you'll go back to, yeah, that's not it. Zoom out, yeah, thank you. So the Leavenworth Road one shows 2017, but of course it's not done yet. Does that mean that's when it started?
Yeah, that would probably be what it is. And this is a initial draft at it. We'll be refining the information as we go and to better understand it. And once, like Rob said, once that gets done, we'll upload the as-built of the plans to there too, and it'll probably stay, construction year will probably change to completed year, would be my guess, just because that makes more sense.
Yeah, well, no,
Right now, it's a budget year.
Yeah, it's budget year right now.
budget year, thank you.
So a lot of these bigger projects like Leavenworth Road, they're budgeted way in advance just because they take so long to do, so.
Thank you.
We can add a lot of information to these tabs. And the question what we really wanted to do, instead of putting a lot of work in, was ask you. Let you have time to look at the document, play with it, and then kind of get your feedback about what information you think is important. We can put budget year, we can put fund numbers. We can do a lot with this map, but we're really interested in what you want and what the community wants. Other questions? Jeff advised us to bring about 75 slides with 5,000 words. We couldn't do it, really, for a 5 o'clock meeting. Thank you, commissioners, for the opportunity to present today.
Yes, Commissioner Johnson.
As always, to deal with the finances, can you mark it by how much each project costs, the cost to the city?
We can put that information in there. We can put budget amount, we can put final spend amount.
Yeah.
Mayor, I would suggest cost and then entities that are paying, because it's often more than just the UG. And do you mind if I ask you a specific question about 2019 CMIP, that first map? Because I was told within the last week or so that 38th Street from State swinging around to Prawn Lane is in this year's preservation, but I don't see it there unless I'm just not looking in the right place.
No, it's probably not on there. We gave Rob maps because he's been building this for a while, and we've added it since then. So it's actually not even going to be in the plans that we've sent to the contractor, but we have a stack that we're giving to the contractor at the pre-construction meeting. We've found since then. So yes, it will be on there.
Thank you.
A few of the things with this map, there's an amount of change that the organization has to take on in order to produce a map like that that's accurate. So a timeline of the year for when we're going to submit projects, when those projects are going to be designed, built, and then pushed up to this map. We've had a lot of conversations with BPU about including their construction in this map. They see a lot of value in this. We've also met with both natural gas companies. They really appreciate the value in seeing this information provided to them. And in return, they're providing us their input as well on these projects. So you will see that in a future tab. This is our first shot at it. We really would appreciate individual feedback or group feedback as well.
Commissioner McKiernan?
Thank you. Well, I can guarantee you I'm going to go play with this. Now I understand when you said we're working on something, it's going to be really cool. I guess my question going forward is, how early will these data be loaded prior to the construction season? As you know, I like to know what's coming before I see an excavator out doing a project. And will we get like just a short email that says, new stuff?
2 points. Traditionally, with most other communities, the CMIP is programmed out 4 or 6 years in advance and does not change. It's very consistent over time. One of the things I'm seeing here is we're very dynamic with our CIP. It does change and fluctuate a little bit. So we are putting together a program that will give timelines for when we update the map. And we'll be bringing that as well as some criteria for selecting our CIP. We talked about that a little bit in the presentation 2 weeks ago to the Planning Commission, and we hope to lock that down a little bit just so we can consistently provide a very high level of service also to our partners in the community so they know when to expect these projects. Generally speaking, this map would come out in an October or November timeframe, and the capital projects wouldn't change for a year. They wouldn't change until the next October. So we'll be looking to build something like that, maintaining the flexibility for this organization to make changes as the year goes through. I'm really sorry I didn't bring 75 slides, I promise.
Well, We feel like this is really a great addition to what we're having as far as conveying information to the commissioners as well as to the public, so people can engage, they can look at it. If they have a question to you, you can tell them where to go and find it, or you can easily access it. So I think we probably will find a lot of additional things we'll add to it over time as we continue to use it, as it's a very good interactive piece or tool for us.
May have to print out cards so I can just hand those out.
There you go.
The Zello project, once that's upgraded, it'll directly integrate into this map, and you should be able to see building projects, active permits. This has been done in several other communities. That's kind of the promise of that upgrade. And then linking in the electronic plan review software, you should have the plans associated with that in the same bullet. So
And when he says building projects, he's talking about private sector building projects, not just ours. So that our buildings would be another layer we'll put on here as we continue to do our stuff. But as we get the Acela software in place, yeah, that's all the stuff that's coming through our plan review process, and then you'll see.
So David wasn't here, but some of you may remember I used to have a whole bunch of sheets of paper that I had taped together and marked up with just this kind of stuff. Mine wasn't nearly as dynamic as this, so I love this.
Commissioner, thank you. This was a lot of work by our team, specifically Rob. There was a lot of people involved, and you kind of had to overcome that hurdle of, I don't want my phone number published. That question, right? I think there's a lot of institutional change you're seeing happen with a map like this. So that feedback is appreciated.
Can we get dollar amounts for the historical years as well?
I think we originally had 10 or 12 years on the map.
Okay.
I think so. We went way back.
But if
we kind of paired it back to something a little more useful.
But if I click on these in the prior years, I don't get any data. I just have the,
I think he's just asking for the financial amount on the 5 years you have up there.
that's what I'm talking
Not
about.
necessarily going back more years.
We can do that as well.
Okay, thank
You
you.
want it on an individual project basis or
Yes.
total? On each one of the projects? Okay. Happy to do that. Another feedback we have received and proposed was breaking this up and putting commission boundaries. Initially, we didn't agree with that. We thought we were looking at the whole community. So that's a question for you to think about. We can do a lot of things with visuals on this map, but we wanted to provide it as one community map for everybody to look at.
All right, well, if there are no other questions, we'll move on to the next part of this presentation. I'll ask Zach Flanders with Planning and Zoning to come forward on a specific project. We didn't present on this 2 weeks ago when we were talking about some, but this is one that's moving forward now. So this is on the 47th Street corridor. And I'll let Zach take it over and give a overview of what's going on here with this project and how we're doing it with the other communities.
Thank you. So back in 2016, we started working on the Rosedale Master Plan and adopted that at the end of 2016. And one of the four, what we called major moves of that plan was to take a look at 47th Avenue. We call it the 47th Avenue Cultural Corridor. This is the county line going east-west between Wyandotte and Johnson County. And it has a lot of development and new restaurants and things happening there. Joe's Kansas City, Taco Republic, Gus's are on our side, for example, and this set some goals for making this a more walkable, livable, bikeable, business-friendly street. So we took that, and at the same time, the city of Westwood was updating their comprehensive plan and came to the same conclusion about what they call 47th Street on their side. They call it street, we call it avenue. But they applied for a grant to do a complete street plan, and we were one of the partners of this study. This is through MARC, Planning Sustainable Places program. And what this study did was look at the street and come up with some design options and do some community outreach. The first thing that we did with this is to ask people what their priorities for the street were. And we had several different options, and we asked people both in public meetings, in an online survey that went out, written responses, and we heard a lot of consensus that people wanted it to be a safe, inviting street, accommodating all users, including pedestrians, cyclists, and transit, and an active, vibrant, business-friendly street. And then traffic operations and parking were kind of lower priorities, which were interesting because we were hearing a lot about how there wasn't always a lot of parking right where you needed it. But when we looked at the actual numbers that came back, we found that that wasn't a huge concern of the community. From there, we took their priorities and we asked what type of design features would they like to see on the road, and listed under all these features were how they contributed to the different priorities. And we got another round of feedback on what people would actually like to see on the road and how they would like the road to look. And from there, I think the most popular across the board, online and in person, were improved sidewalks, crosswalks and street trees, bike facilities, and landscaping. And crosswalks, if I haven't mentioned that. It was kind of interesting, again, the on-street parking and the median were the lowest across the board. People felt that the median in the middle, if we put a green space in the middle, although it would beautify the street, might be kind of wasted space when it could contribute to pedestrian activity or cycling activity. And interesting, again, the on-street parking didn't rate very high on these surveys. Then from there, we did 4 different options. And option A and C are kind of the bike facility option with a short-term paint only and a long-term, if we were to rebuild the street, what it could look like. And then B and D included more of the on-street parking options with a short-term and long-term. And we asked for feedback on these options. And you're seeing the results from the board that A and C were pretty popular, not as much B and D, and that was consistent across the online surveys as well. This plan was adopted in February 2018 by Westwood, and we adopted it, I think, shortly after that. And what we did is we immediately applied for a STP, Surface Transportation Plan Program grant. That's one of the big pots of federal money. The city of Westwood was the lead on that, and it was the highest ranking application on the entire Kansas side of the metro for that year in 2018. We were awarded funding. The total project cost was $1.8 million. The grant amount, which is 80%, is $1.47 million. And then our local share would be half of the 20%, or about $185,000. The City of Westwood is planning to do the striping option this year in 2019. They've said that they're going to start designing that in the middle of the year, which I guess would be now, and hope to have it done by the end of the year. And that they're not really asking for any contribution from the UG for that. They are just wanting our participation and agreement to do this on the street. And then the funding for the rebuild would be in the year 2022, and that's when we would need to be thinking about including that $185,000 into the CMIP, or otherwise funding that, our local contribution. Any questions over that update?
Commissioner Bynum?
Thanks. I'm kind of a semi-related question as far as the bike paths and things like that. Is there a way that we're able to collect data on how many people are cycling or using a certain roadway? And then secondarily, didn't we allow to deploy the scooters in certain areas, and do we have any information on whether they are being used?
So we did an extensive traffic study as part of this PSP, Planning Sustainable Places grant, that I did not go into in this presentation. They actually installed video monitors on all the poles. And I should also mention, this is just between Rainbow and Mission. So it's about a half-mile stretch of road here. And so they were able to not only get cyclist counts, but know whether people were biking on the sidewalk, which was actually, I think, more than half the people, or in the road. So it's kind of interesting that people are biking this today, but they're biking on the sidewalk because there's not really a transportation facility that accommodates cyclists. So yeah, it'd be interesting to do that once they do the paint only. And the idea is this is a test of before we completely rebuild the street, test it out and see how operations work. And I imagine doing some more counts would be a good idea.
Commissioner, regarding the scooters, well, we've made the ordinance change. We just signed into one of the agreements about a month ago, so we will be able to get that because part of that agreement comes to, they'll pay us $1 a day for any scooter that starts or ends its destination within our community within that agreement. So we'll be able to see where they travel around. It's part of the agreement with them. We can see, we'll also be able to see if somebody just comes in and out, but we'll be able to get some of that tracking, but we haven't started to get any of that information yet.
I'll also add bike share. We had, if you recall, some funding to do bike share in 2020. So that would be around the same time that they're repainting the street. And I think 47th and Mission could be a good candidate for where to put one of those stations. And one of the property owners said that he would welcome a bike share station in front of his business. So that's a good sign.
Thank you, Zach.
Thank you.
All right, so that concludes our two presentations that we had. The next section really just gets right back to where we are as far as capital projects. We submitted to you all the list of capital projects. If anybody needs a copy of anything tonight, just let us know. Reggie's got some additional copies over here if you want to see anything. I think the key as we come into tonight, as I said, we put together a budget that for 19 and 20 stays within our $15 million a year for where we go with debt, and then trying to manage what we can handle from a cash perspective to keep our projects within that, along with the other things we contribute cash to. The out years of 21, 22, 23 do not stay within that 15 million yet. As I noted, when we start to hit projects, building projects, and layering those in with what we're doing with our road projects, we extend beyond that. And I know the directive from the governing body was we want to stay within that, so it's not an immediate decision to say we have to get this back, but it kind of goes to what David Young was pointing out, how I think it was nice how he said that. Dynamic, yes. We're more dynamic in the sense that we typically reduce our budget down from what we're putting out there. We still have projects, we'd move stuff to unfunding or not, we put them on that list, but until we make a decision we're going to put the money to them, we may have to remove $5 million from that list. So that's probably a key to it. If we're within that, then you may shift a project or two, but right now it is not set up to go that way. So as I said, it's not an immediate decision that we have to go to say anything that from what's in 19 and 20. If you have questions or thoughts on those, that we went through a little bit more with those last week, but in the out years, we're either gonna have to make a decision that we're okay with the funding level, or we start to reduce those from where we're at. Debbie, do you have any additional comments?
No, I don't. We did bring the graph that we left off the presentation with 2 weeks ago, showing, and this graph does graph the debt service as the CMIP is with the increased amounts in years 21 through 23.
Thank you. So as noted, so that's at the 16.9 or 17 mils, calculating about a 1.5–2% increase per year going forward, so it can handle it. But one of the thoughts of the commission too was, how do we ever start to reduce where we're at on the committed debt level if we keep committing it every year? So we're open to any questions or comments or any projects you want to talk about.
Commissioner Markley?
I already mentioned this concern to our county administrator, but I'll bring it up here just so everybody's aware that I've brought it up. One of those projects on the unfunded list in my district is the Douglas Key Lane sort of area. And as some of you know, we just passed a bond issue, and the stadium in Turner is going to be moving into that vicinity. So I have concerns about that road. We already know is unsafe. There are a number of accidents there. I have concerns about 100 high school students turning that corner in the evening after a football game. So I just asked that our staff get together with the school district and talk about what kind of entrance and exit situation they're looking at and how that might impact that street that we already know is an issue. So,
Commissioner, is it your understanding that the access to the stadium will be from within the existing Turner High School parking area?
yes, but I still think we're going to see a ton of traffic to get around to
Right.
get into the game and then out of the game at the same time. So, we're used to our stadium right now, for those who aren't familiar with the Turner area, is on like the other side of the district, so it's far away. So this will be a new situation where they're having a whole lot of traffic on that road, all in a very tight time frame for track and for football and their other sports. So
Right. I mean, I could see for those who are visitors coming in, let's say, from outside of Wyandotte County, coming from the south, they're probably going to be traveling down Gibbs Road to Key Lane, and then back around Key Lane to Douglas, and then just depending upon where their navigator takes them. But Commissioner McKiernan.
Thank you, Mayor. As you know, I missed the first part of the last one, and I've looked through the PowerPoint and I've looked through the spreadsheets. One question is about unfunded projects. Last year, that was a third spreadsheet that just had unfunded projects. Are unfundeds at the end of the debt or the cash spreadsheet and I just missed them? Or is there a third spreadsheet that I missed?
Those are not included here. I know in the presentation, Public Works had listed a lot of the unfunded projects in the presentation, so we
that
did
was in
not
their
add an
PowerPoint?
additional.
So it was just, okay, on slides, I guess this goes to David's earlier comment, slides 33 and 34. Okay, don't we at some point, I'm sorry, 33, 34, 35. Last year I could have sworn that we, and maybe I'm hallucinating, that we had an estimated cost associated with some of these that is not on the,
I believe we did give you a sheet last year that listed out the unfunded projects with just, a total cost of the project.
with an estimated cost for each of those projects.
That's
Is
correct.
it possible to still get that in the same spreadsheet format as the cash and the debt spreadsheets are?
I think so.
Okay. And then I guess my only other real question is, as I go through these, is I have looked at the presentation. I have several questions about things that were actually presented and probably discussed while I wasn't here. And then I have a whole bunch of other questions just about funding levels and projects, and especially where there have been changes either in the amended 19 or in the 20 budget. And rather than take everybody's time here, what's my best route? Should I go through Doug's office? Should I go through Jeff's office? How should I just organize some follow-up?
You want to specifically ask about those projects?
I have several very specific questions on projects, and I realize that those projects run across the gamut.
Okay.
But the majority that I'm going to be asking about are public works projects.
I think we'd probably want to sit down, Jeff, with you or Troy or David, whichever we want to do it.
Okay.
With Jeff, we can schedule that way.
So I'll just contact his office and then just let everybody know that I've contacted his office.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
And back to one of the questions that Commissioner McKiernan asked, if the unfunded projects would come with expected expenditures, it'd be helpful for us, because trying to distinguish and discern, what would this mean? What would be the impact? If we had those numbers, it'd be very helpful.
We'll provide a total project cost.
Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Bynum?
On the paper copy, page 3, debt financed, the community projects, and then it lists the Fairfax industrial area improvements, booking in at 100 grand a year across the board. Is that the TDD money?
That is, no, that's in addition to, the TDD funding is listed on the cash project
Okay.
sheet. So this is
Additional.
additional.
Thank you. That's a good question, Tom.
That's multiple source funding.
Leave that to our imagination.
So you'll see that show up on multiple. Can you point out where the Holiday Bridge,
Right, that's on page 2 of the debt. It's the first one under the bridge category, Holiday Drive Bridge Replacement.
It was over something.
Commissioner Bynum?
Maybe somewhere in here, we've been holding a place for a northeast substation for the police. Is it in the unfunded that I don't have on paper here?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thanks.
Can I ask a question also, Mayor, to follow up to that?
Yes, sir.
The placeholders that we do see for the fire stations, have we determined where they're going to be located, or are we just placing that just in general? And I'm talking about year 2021 and year 2023.
Debt financing, page 2.
what was the question?
In year 2021 and 2023, we have placeholders under debt finance projects for fire stations. And I just want to know, had we determined where those were going to be? Is the one for the Piper in 2021, or was that already in prior years?
That's one we've already funded.
Right.
So we are making final determinations on where we are.
Okay.
We will be scheduling meetings with the commissioners probably in the next couple of weeks to sit down and kind of walk through that. And we'll either do those in on-threes, and some may move to executive sessions, because in most of those cases, particularly these where they're new, it could require land acquisition, so we don't necessarily want to call that out. But I think we're doing them, we are doing them in on-threes to come in, so we'll be scheduling those fairly shortly.
I know we had a plan in the past. It's probably been modified or nuanced a certain way. So is there an overall master plan for capital expansion for the public safety overall?
For fire? Yes.
Fire in particular?
Yes, they have a complete plan that we've worked through and gone back through and updated, and actually Chief Andrade's sitting here, who has that task as one of his duties that he's working on, that we have the renovations that are major renovation projects, where they're at on priorities versus the ones that are complete replacement stations. So we're coming back with that and showing you how we can do that over 20 years. Obviously it structures into how we keep to it, or a pace to keep to it for doing it, but we at least have a plan put out for it now.
Good. We'll stay tuned.
Commissioner McKiernan?
I do have a question about the unfunded list. Now that I look, I see unfunded road construction or transportation projects, unfunded park master plan, and other unfunded. I don't see the police station that you just asked about, and also I don't see a parks project.
The police station wouldn't be on that list, but on our unfunded list.
On a list like
Okay, so this goes back to something that we've talked about many times over the years, about what's on this list And can we keep I don't, because I see something under parks that was on the list last year, St. Margaret's Park, it's not on this list. Where'd it go? I want to make sure that stuff doesn't drop off this list just because we're not paying attention to it. I mean, if it's worth getting put on this list, we need to track it, and ideally, we need to try to accomplish the project and not just have it disappear. So that is one reason I want this in the same format as last year, because I still have last year's, and I want to be able to cross-check.
Here's the,
So I have to go right along with him on that, because it did take us a while to actually get those on a list. And we've been fighting to get those on a list. And now because it's only on a sheet, you know, and we weren't given it, guys, come on, out of sight, out of mind, no, that ain't gonna work. You gotta give it to us, so we still have to see these things to compare, because I know we're gonna be in a budget crunch. So we really need to be able to check what we wanna do and what we don't wanna do, and so we really need to see those two, please. Thank you.
We'll definitely get the list out to you all.
Commissioner Kane.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I am glad to see that we're pushing forward with refurbishing the fire stations and stuff like that, and I'm glad it's showing a few years out. But the Northeast Police Substation, in my mind, is huge. So I don't want to say we should prioritize that, but we should prioritize that. You know, the people, they're asking for a couple of days a week, and hopefully working into where it's a full-time situation. But in my mind, that ought to be one of our priorities.
Mike, I do see it under, on paper, on page 5 of the debt finance projects, it's showing up under year 2022.
And to that point, Commissioner Kane, and I think what we're looking towards is that the police substation would be part of perhaps a larger development, which would include retail. And so those projects are still, when I understand, kind of pursuing those, and that will determine where the location would be. So, well, and one thing bundled together that we would help support that development.
And I think that's great. But history shows that staff had dropped their ball. And this time I don't want the ball dropped.
I'll just clarify on that. When we put no funding source by it, it is under special revenue projects because it was put in place that we would identify that there'd be some other funding if it become a retail project or something like that associated to it. So if we want to fund it, we need to move it into one of the other categories and count on it for debt.
Yeah, because I completely overlooked and maybe just ignored no funding source because it's under debt finance projects. I see that now, but
yeah, and that's how we put
prioritize
all those for special revenue, because just like the Turner exchange, you know, I needed to have other revenue sources come in, and that's we did, and that's how it came up. And then last year we came up with the demo, or 2 years ago on the demolition money, and that's why that's set there and that funded up, and it showed we were going to transfer money from city cash over to make that happen or pay for that annually. But we have not identified that on the Northeast Patrol Station. That's why I specifically wrote the words, had them write those words on there.
Yes, Commissioner Townsend.
Oh, thank you. Well, I think the administrator just clarified it. I did want to add that it was my understanding that this Northeast Police Station was an outgrowth of the Northeast Master Plan, where the key was development. So as opposed to Commissioner Kane's fire station, which was indeed needed and a complete standalone. I didn't want anybody to think I think we're dropping the ball if we don't fund this. I mean, it's adequately shown based on how it was presented as kind of an addendum, a go-along with other retail developments. So glad the fire station is broken in, but this is a little bit different. So.
Commissioner Kane.
Is there some grant funding out there somewhere that we could use to help do some of this?
There might be, and I asked our federal lobbyists about it. 4 or 5 years ago, there was more money toward buildings. He said that they'd kind of gone away from it recently, though that opportunity may cycle back around and could be a good one for us to access.
I think this would be a good time to do it. You know, things are looking a little better, you know, and maybe we ask again.
Mr. Burrows?
Thank you. I see on page 3 of the debt financed, we have the animal services facility. I'm assuming that we're going to start construction in 2023. Is that the 4.3 million set aside for the new animal shelter?
I think that's still pending. I mean, we left it in here as it was an initiative to move forward with, and you see multi-source funding checked there, so you can look under, and there's no funding in the multi-source piece. So what we came back was an $8.6 million facility. We had direction back from the commission to say, okay, we still want to do something, but that's a lot. Go find a way to do this at a lower cost facility. And if you want to do something as elaborate's maybe the wrong word, but it's as extensive as that is, then you need to come up with other sources of funding that can offset anything that much. So that's why we pushed it out there that far and said, let's work on it. We're trying to look at some different funding sources or different avenues this year to see what we can do between that $2 and $4 million mark, so we have something to bring back to you, because that was funded in this year's budget, to look at it and figure out what we could do, and then we'll come back and say, can we do something here that we would find acceptable?
Commissioner Bynum? Excuse me, Philbrook? Sorry.
So I just want to tag along on that one. So yes, that's great. We really do need to see what options are. You know, because I know when we came back with an 8.6 million, I about swallowed my tongue. And I'm like, well, that's not going to happen. But there's a lot of other ways we can address this. And another thing is can we get these mics turned down a little bit? These are a little loud. Sorry. Well, if I speak up, I will blow this place apart. Anyway, and if you can hear it echoing also. So anywho, so the 4.3 million is just kind of a placeholder in the middle. And that would be, now is that how much we're talking about, or the total amount? Because, you know, if I'm gonna go out there and try to find funding, I need to know what I'm going after.
We will bring back to you a report on what we think is a good number for that in the future. This number was a placeholder that we were working on to come back with a more refined number.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Burrows?
Do we have another targeted project dealing with our fire facilities, ongoing maintenance and/or replacement of some of our antiquated fire facilities? Could staff guide me as to where we might find that? Would it be in the debt financed projects? Or
I think the only thing we have in debt for the fire is just the 2 stations. Is there anything else in there?
So what you find
Bottom
under
of page
debt
2.
on page 2 at the bottom of
Page
that,
2.
you'll see a fire station at 5.9 million in 21, and then 6.3 million in 2023. Renovation work, I don't know, if that just is in a bulk number, isn't it, somewhere?
That's what I was trying to find.
Under the cash section, we do have an amount under fire. It's on page 1 of the cash projects for fire station remodel repair. There's 100,000 for 2019.
And we only have that funded for 1 year.
They also have under the dedicated sales tax, annual fire station renovations on page 3.
Page what? I'm sorry.
Page 3 of the cash section. There's 200,000 per year.
Annual fire station interior renovation. So we have you basically have 1.2 million over a period of 5 years set aside.
Or planned, yes.
Yeah, okay. I know our,
Probably need more than that in some of the
Yeah.
areas as we go through and do it. When we have specific renovation projects, they could be $500,000 easily. Specifically, once we get to the point of ready to adopt a plan.
I would hope that we would give consideration, if these stations are costing us more to renovate and still do not meet the criteria that the new chief has recommended, it's particularly in the new station, that some of those, we would consider finding a way to replace those and versus trying to continue to shore them up through the renovations. I believe our public safety personnel should at least have an environment that is conducive to the hours that they spend in those facilities. Some of them are quite antiquated. Those buildings could be sold out and repurposed for something else, and those dollars go towards a long-term plan to replace our fire facility buildings. We're a city of first class, and it really concerns me greatly when we don't seem to think that way. We're a modern city. We have tremendous opportunity. We've passed that 3.8 cent sales tax for public safety. I truly believe that our public safety, in reference to our police department, in reference to our sheriff's department, in reference to our fire department, that these facilities are getting quite antiquated. And it's like throwing all money into an old clunker just to keep it running to avoid having to buy a new car. It comes time that you've exceeded the life of the building and it's time to move on and do something else. Some of these the equipment's gotten bigger, the demands on fire safety equipment's gotten has expanded quite considerably. I would just hope that we would take a long-term plan. I looked at the history of when we built, the number of stations we built a handful of, a couple decades back. I'd like to see us get on a plan, forward-thinking plan to replace those public safety facilities.
Commissioner, I think we'll be showing you something in a couple of weeks, and you'll be able to see just how we've gone through and broke out all the different fire stations. The fire department and facilities went through a pretty extensive review of those to look at ones to say, because we can't build them all, and if we could build them all in the next couple of years, then you don't have to. But if you go through one, you say, well, this needs to be replaced, but it doesn't need to replace as much as this, and it's going to be 10 years, you still might have to spend some money on it before you get 10 years out. But if we're on a cycle to replace every 2 to 3 years, it still takes a while to get through 10 stations. And that is one part of it, so we recognize overlaid with that, there's a renovation budget that comes into place as well. But we're trying to do that. We've been working on it for a while, and it's time to figure out how to get it funded.
Well, I know our deferred maintenance is quite a burden on us budget-wise, and we're not unique in that, being a community that is as old as we are. That we're putting all this new money into infrastructure, which is greatly needed, and I would hope that we would give strong consideration as we build that new infrastructure, that we talk about building long-term viable facilities that we will no longer have to spend a tremendous amount of money maintaining, that we become more efficient in how we design and build our facilities, particularly our public safety facilities, because the issues have changed when it comes to not only fire safety, but even public safety as a whole. Jails have changed, and we're building a new jail. I just would like to see our public safety side of our budget be reflective of the values that we as a commission share in our public safety department.
Commissioner Murguia?
I have 3 different questions. Are benefit districts on here somewhere?
I don't think there's a section for benefit districts.
Because we don't have any, or because they're not in this?
They're not in the CMIP.
Okay. Just want to make sure I have the right area. Yes.
Where did the benefit district show up? I guess is the question.
They would normally have shown up under the, probably around, I think they used to be around the community projects section, but they're not there. We don't have any benefit districts funded for 19 or 20.
Okay, so that's the answer. We don't have any benefit
Right.
districts in funding.
So we just all talked about this. Go ahead, Commissioner Buck. Do you want to add?
No, I was just thinking the same thing you are, because I thought that at Public Works and Safety, that there was a plan, that we agreed to a plan. Rosedale, what's the neighborhood, Commissioner?
Great question.
With the sidewalk
Was it TA?
project. I think
Yeah.
those are the same, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, I knew exactly what you were asking about.
This is the benefit district that got lost for like 7 years. No, might have been 10 that we were going to do, and then it just fell off.
Right, and we've gave very extensive updates on it.
Yes, but it's not on any
Detailed
list.
Information, I think, the funding piece. So, Jeff, you want to reflect on where we are and what we've
Yeah, I guess I'm not
over,
quite sure
Commissioner?
how to capture that in a CIP. There was monies in there to do engineering study, that was done. And now, the last report we made to standing committee was that we were gonna be engaging that neighborhood, figure out which concept we want, and then we'll have to get back together and figure out how we're gonna fund it. So I'm not sure how to capture that project in a CIP.
Okay, so what they did in the past before you, Jeff, is that they listed all of the benefit districts in the order in which the neighborhoods had come forward and presented them, so that we knew they were put in order based on first come, first serve.
Okay.
And then the money, if there wasn't money that year, it was pushed out into later years so that it wouldn't drop off our radar. Just what Commissioner McKiernan and Commissioner Bynum and all of us have said about when a project gets on the list, removing it from the list is not helpful to us, because then we can't track it. And we have projects ourselves that we're trying to keep track of, and then every year we get new projects, just like you guys do. So it'd be helpful if it was on here, and I recognize it wouldn't necessarily demonstrate funding for a particular year, but that's how I knew it was 7 years.
Maybe that goes in the unfunded, because there's not even a dollar figure to attach to it yet, because we don't know what we're gonna do. Would that be?
Yeah, either or is fine. I just need it on a list so that we can keep track of it.
Okay.
And I need it, because what I don't want to see happen is we get new commissioners, then they want to do benefit districts in their area, and they don't understand why they're not first on the list when they haven't seen a list.
Okay.
Okay, the last two things I have, Jeff, you can stay there because you'll probably have a comment about this. So I actually had Jeff look at a significant drainage problem. I don't know if it's considered drainage, but it's a drainage cover issue located at 21st and Metropolitan in front of the new Save-A-Lot, the new Dollar General, and the new Walmart Market. And what I had mentioned many times, the amount of traffic on that street since we put up the new Save-A-Lot and the new Walmart in particular, and how dangerous that area is. And there needs to be another way to get to 18th Street Expressway, because a number of people are coming from other areas of our city to the Walmart in Argentine. So there is a road, and I've looked it up, and there's no road sign on the road, so I can't tell you exactly what street it is, but I think it's also 18th Street. It's just not the expressway, it's an actual neighborhood street. It's a one-lane road, and it would allow for traffic to go back out and to get on I-70, or get on 18th Street and go back towards the north side of town. If we don't do something, there's significant traffic there, and there is an a middle school there. Argentine Middle is also there. And in Argentine, we have tons of foot traffic after the middle school gets out of school. So if we could look at making that single lane road into a double lane road so that traffic could actually just go past 18th Street, underneath it, and then connect with it by heading south on that road. I think, Jeff, you know what I'm talking about.
I do.
Okay, so I think that would be one way to address the traffic issue. The second concern, or the third concern I had is, You know, I think our number one employer in the state is KU Med and KU Hospital. And as a result, there's lots of traffic during the day that go to and from the medical center and the hospital. And staff that work there have figured out if they, instead of exiting off on 7th Street or Rainbow, if they exit off early when they're coming from the south on 35, if they exit off on Mission Road, they can do a shortcut because Mission Road moves a lot faster, and then they can take a left at, I think it's 43rd Street. Yes. Yeah. So you figured that out also. Yeah, so there is an enormous amount of traffic, and we have a couple of issues, one of which I believe to be a public safety issue. Someone allowed for a crosswalk from the east side of the street to the west side of the street going to Rosedale Park. That crosswalk sits at the top of a hill of traffic flying off I-35. So the traffic flies up the hill, and right as you start to crest the top of the hill, there's a crosswalk, and there's no flashing lights. There's nothing there to notify people that there's an upcoming crosswalk. And that road was in horrible condition, and then over the winter got in 10 times worse condition. And the street department has done an excellent job patching the holes on the street, but it's not going to stand the amount of traffic that drives on that street. I can't imagine for another year. I just drove on it today. It's in terrible shape, and the traffic moves fairly swiftly up there. So if we could look at fixing Mission Road, again, the 18th Street Expressway to get people out. I mean, it's a good problem to have. I'll just say again, it's a good problem to have when you have huge amounts of traffic increasing in your district. But if we don't get ahead of it, it's just going to be an ongoing problem.
Commissioner?
I have to agree with Ann. Don't tell anybody. I have to agree with Ann on that, because when you top that hill, yeah, I mean, you don't even see that until you're up there on it. And if I slammed on my brakes because somebody's in there, there'd be people up my tailpipe for sure. So I think that if we could put some kind of a preemptive warning, there's a crosswalk up ahead or something, because I don't know if people are going to read it or not, but we can try, because it is dangerous. All right, you guys, quit chuckling back there.
We do have one of our partners evaluating the KU area, doing sort of a traffic study of that area. It's not done yet, but we can report back to you when we have that.
Yeah, that'll be great. It's just that the amount of traffic going up that hill just gets greater and greater every day. And the new parking garage that KU built is already full, and they still have people parking on the streets and stuff. So it's getting to be a significant problem over there if we don't get in front of it. I don't know what's going to happen.
Staff agrees.
Yeah.
I might ask, I've gone through the debt and I see a bunch of new projects that have been implemented or have been put into the budget for 2019. I'm looking at all the pages on the debt finance project. There was a number of new items. I would ask that next time you present this, could you put the aggregate total of those new items in one sum, so that we see how much debt we're adding with new projects in one sum?
You mean a total for the project for all?
If I'm reading this right, I'm looking at page 2. I'm looking at the 7th Street US 69 Central Avenue reconstruction, and it says new. So if you could put the aggregate of all the new projects, the totals for us, so we don't have to go back and try to add them up in our head. If we could add that, it might give us a clearer picture as to the amount of financial impact the CMIP has as we move forward. I'm not trying to create additional work. I think it might help us if we see the aggregate totals, and sometimes sticker shock has a way of.
So for all new projects that were added, you want a total project cost or a by year?
If I'm reading it correctly, all the squares that are in the says new column.
Right.
They have a price associated to them up through, looks like even 19 through 24.
That's correct.
So if if you could break those aggregate numbers down, you can either break them down by year.
Okay.
So in 2019, we have 22 million. That gets back to the 15 million that we've been talking about in working the budget. If we could see those aggregate totals, it might help us when we sit down to do the budget and know that these new projects are out here, and this is what we've projected the cost to be and where we're going to be moving forward. It's just a suggestion that
We can add that.
I think by year in those, and that's where you're seeing most of them added. They're 21 and beyond, for most of them that have come into play. That one's a good example of one that's in 20. You do see at the bottom of page 3, it shows you that aggregate total coming along there where we see where we stayed at the, you know, how we're trying to keep that 15 million. That's the line, because some debt goes into different areas. That's the general fund debt. You know, that's where you show that, like when we ended last year, the 2019 original, we were at 13.5, and then the commission opted to add projects later in the year, so we had to move that up to 15.3, and then 20 where we're still below the 15 million. But then you see the number 22, 20, 24. Those are the numbers that we either got to get in line, or, I mean, we can handle it within that amount of debt, assuming the mill levy stays constant for debt, or we need to reduce these down. And it's mainly driven by, we're adding building projects. They cost money.
I have a question. So on the issue of the $15 million target, do you want commissioners to suggest to you how to get to 15 million, or will staff be showing us an option that gets us to the 15 million in those out years?
I will say, if you don't give me any suggestions, then the question will probably come more into the fall when we start to do a little bit more of our strategic planning, Commissioner, and the question I will have to you will be, do you want to spend $15 million, or do you want to do the projects? And if you have suggestions, there would be, but that's where I have to have that guidance, because right now I'm getting conflicting guidance on it, and it's a year out before we have to make that decision. But it's a hard push to say, let's do the buildings and do all the streets we've been doing, and let's not issue any more debt. So.
Well, I'm not saying we don't issue any more, but we have a target of 15 million.
Yes, sir.
So I guess the question is, do you want those recommendations now so we can get them out of the CMIP worksheet that shows the inflated debt in future years, or do you want to wait till next fall? Is that what you're saying?
We can do it now if you want to get into it.
I'll just send you a memo or something.
Yeah, I mean, those ideas, I think probably part of that will be some hard decisions, probably as a collective group. Hitting it in the fall would probably be a good time to hit it hard, but if you want to send me a memo on your thoughts of that, then it gives us something to start working on.
Okay, thank you.
Is 15 million just the magic number that we've identified to balance our budget, or is 17 million one year, 13 million the next? Or is it the aggregate over a period of time that you're looking at, or is it just a soft target? Where did for those of us who haven't been around, where did the 15 million come into play?
That's a great question. It really comes from this, when you're looking at the debt level, that if we moved year to year and we were fluctuating, and we were trending up probably back toward 2010 and 11 to get up to 17, 18 million dollars in debt that was coming out. It takes a few years before that cycles back in, and then you go issue bonds, because we'll issue, and I know Kathleen and Debbie have gone over this a few times, but it's always one as you work through it. Like the 15 million that we're doing this year, it'll probably be 3 to 4 years before we bond all that money. So the bonding amount floats each year, but whatever we end up doing, if you average 15 million a year, eventually, basically we're averaging 15 million in debt that gets added on each time. Well, we looked at it a few years ago and said, okay, we don't want to obligate any more mills toward debt than we already are. So that means let's keep this down. Let's keep it at the $15 million number, because it was, when we ran the graphs, it was handling it. And so that's where that's where the 15 million came from. Now then it started to show, well, when you look at a chart like this, especially if you layered it back in and said only 15, you probably don't have that one loaded tonight. But if we only did 15, then you start to get a gap in those out years. Then there's an opportunity if you want to reduce the mill rate from debt, then that opportunity exists that you could start to do that in a few years. But if you keep, if we do it like this, then you can never take it away. And that was kind of that comparable when we looked at it and said, well, we keep taking money away from operating. And when we were at a total of 45 mills, you balance that out and said, okay, we got 28 mills in operating and now 17 mills in debt. Didn't seem so much. As we hit this last fall, I think it became strikingly apparent to everyone that now we're down to 22 mills in operating and 17 in debt. So we've taken all the money off the operation side, which is all the money that goes toward, mowing and running and police and fire and running everything else, and we're not taking any money off the debt side. So that's where that question comes, and I think that's where Commissioner Walters was looking at that point, where you come back to and say, well, if you want to start taking it off the debt somewhere, you can't. You can do it if you stay at the 15 level, assuming our mill rate continues to gain in value. Because then 17 mills would become worth more money. So that, it's not artificial. I mean, it was set up based on a trend where we are saying that's enough. That's as much as we're going to do.
Well, I'm pleased to hear there was a process. It shows that we are taking our debt reduction as well as our bonding very seriously. And I'm just pleased to hear that we have a process in place in which to identify the amount of debt that we want to incur. But I also realize that we have a tremendous amount of significant projects that need to be addressed. And the bond interest is very low right now compared to what it could be in 3 to 5 years. And so I'm not advocating more debt, but we should be strategic in these major projects that we have out there so that we don't spend funds on some things when we have a major project out there that needs to be addressed. And that would just be my concern as we go into the budget, and I'll be more than happy to share that with others as we go on.
Well, I think it comes back to that 38 mills on the city side, 17 of those are being used to pay debt service, which leaves 21 for operations. If we do bond more projects, that means our debt service will go up, which means more of our mill levy will go to that. So that's the trade-off where we are. We don't have enough monies to go around to do all the things we want to do, and we have to be very strategic with all of these projects going forward.
I'd like to also add that, well, the rating agencies are tolerating the current $15 million a year level, but yeah, and if we want to issue more debt, then the financial capacity of the organization would need to improve, and that means that the assessed value needs to improve. All right, so our debt ratios are not very high. I've presented information are rather high. They're not very favorable, and I've presented information to that respect. So I'm just cautioning you that 15 million is about we should really stick with that 15 million a year.
I think we're about done here. All right, if there are no more questions, Commissioner Town, we have a executive session. I'd entertain a motion.
I move the commission go into executive session until 7:10 p.m. to consult with our attorneys and to discuss under the attorney-client privilege confidential matters related to pending claims and litigation as permitted under the Kansas Open Meetings Act, and that staff designated by the county administrator be present to participate in the discussion, and that if there is no further business, that we adjourn at the conclusion of the executive session.
Roll call.
Roll call, Kane. 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 Markley.
Aye.
Walters. Philbrook.
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye.
Burrows. Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Bugia. Johnson.
Most expensive we have